Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Tech Woke Podcast. I am your host, Chris, a cybersecurity specialist inside the GovTech space. And in today's podcast, we upgraded. We got a CISO. So in this podcast, we're going to have a great guest. He's going to talk about CMMC. He has a lot of things to talk about with auditing, the GovTech space, auditing in the government environments. So the guest that we're going to have today, his name is Scott Bly. He's a field CISO director for the system integration system. He has a CSSP, he has a CISM. He's been working in cybersecurity for many, many years, over 20 years. He's worked in AI, cloud, app security. And without further ado, Scott Bly, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah, big fan. I'm a fan too, and I appreciate you coming in. And shout out to Julia. She's been helping in the background, helping me with a lot of stuff, helping us connect together and connecting with the company. So shout out to her. So, you know, that's who helped us combine together. Just so we can start this podcast, we're just going to say, hey, if you're watching the podcast, make sure you comment down below. Make sure you like the podcast, share. And if you have any comments throughout the podcast, just say something. This is live. This is not pre-recorded. So if you have something, you might not get another opportunity. You better use it like your last. So just make sure you're keeping it going. So just to start it off, Scott, the first question I'm going to ask you.
I guess I had to join the chat too then, huh?
Yeah, you might. I had
to join the chat too then. Hang on, let me try
that. Just write something.
Hang on. It's not a party until it's a party.
Yeah, you got to start the party.
To the comment. That's on the YouTube. I only see the private chat, so maybe I can't. That's okay.
No, that's cool. You're going to see it. Once they start commenting, you're going to see it. And you can comment too. I'm going to bring it up.
Oh, I do get to see it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, good deal.
So without further ado, Scott, tell me about this. So I have a question. So a lot of people think cybersecurity is just about passing audits. And a lot of people think it is when it's come to checking the box. But why do companies fail even though they have policies in place? And I know you know this very well from working in the compliance space.
Yeah, we've seen it a lot. A lot of organizations, they look at cybersecurity as a way to make sure that they're able to pass the compliance audit, right? Because it's a requirement, right? In order to do business, in order to specifically, if we're talking about CMMC, in order to be a DoD contractor, you have to have now CMMC compliance. And so they go, okay, what do I need to have that, right? In order to, I don't know, an analogy might be in order to go buy a car, you have to have a credit rating or something, whatever bad analogy there is. So they look at the series of items that are required as a way to make sure that they're able to satisfy that, check the box, and continue doing business. Now, maybe from a CFO's perspective, you want to get that done in the least expensive way possible. But the problem is there's a huge difference between compliance checking the box and what the intention of that compliance is. The intention is to show, here is a series of requirements that you have in order to do business. This is just the baseline. This is the bottom. It's the bottom floor, right? You don't go to a beautiful building and just hang out on the bottom floor. You want to go up and you want to check out the view around. In cybersecurity, our objective, our goal should be to exceed those minimal requirements so that we can lead the way and show this is how you lead in the cybersecurity domain, because that's about reducing risk. It's about exercising excellence. It's about making sure that you can prove it. And the proving it part is where the audit comes in. Policies that are required for a lot of the compliance, that's the set of written documents that say, I take this particular control seriously. The audit is what actually measures how you have gone in and actually achieved that policy objective. And there's a lot of times there's a huge gap in between that, right? Folks say, oh yeah, I've got this. And you go look, and it turns out, not so much, right? So that's where you see a lot of companies fail the audit, even though they think they have the policy in place. It's because their declared reality and what's actually happening. Or maybe it's happening, but they don't have the documentation to prove it. We'll talk a little bit more about that, I guess, in a bit when we get into some of the nitty-gritty details. But for an example, a policy says you've got a quarterly access review, but the problem is nobody actually owns it. Nobody stores the evidence. Nobody knows where to even find it when the assessor assessor finds it, or when the assessor asks for it, and the next thing. So the policy in that case was correct, but the implementation was absent. So the two very different problems.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. There's been times I worked on certain programs or certain missions, and I'd be like, I read it, and I'm like, okay, we have these access control in place. So we go to the actual engineers, and I'm like, they didn't actually implement what these access controls should do, or how we're supposed to scan containers, or
That's
how we're
right.
supposed to do scans. I'm like, what is going on? You know? So that's what the
paper tiger.
You said paper tiger, and hey, that's what it is.
Yes, exactly.
So from your experience, what
scary the way it's written down, but it's not real.
Yeah, it's not real at all. And that's a good one. So from your experience, what is the biggest misunderstanding people have about compliance and security? Are they the same? Are they one and the same? What's some of the misconceptions that you dealt with?
Yeah, they're not. So assuming that you've crossed over the bridge, the chasm from that policy versus reality that we talked about a second ago, then the next thing to really think about is compliance happens once, right? Unless you have continual compliance in place through code or through an automation program. Compliance is somebody comes, looks, checks the box, says, yep, you did it. You did the things, you proved it. You are compliant at that moment. But your security organization, your IT organization is not static. It's in a state of constant flux, especially these days. Right. So the security is actually more about the posture. What's the reality of how well you're able to defend against threats that are coming in? In the case of a DoD contractor, so you've got North Korea or China trying to beat down the door. Sure, you're compliant on day one. And then on day two, you go and you swap out your firewall and you leave your admin password default. Guess what's going to happen? You got a bad day. Right. So security is more about making sure that you have things in place and you're actually following through on that. But not just that you're looking at it from a risk management perspective, and you're trying to make sure that you apply those principles and exceed them so that you're reducing risk and protecting your mission in the case of a government mission, right? So you can have an organization that treats compliance as the floor, and they're just barely going to get through, right? You still have plenty of problems, especially now in the future with Mythos and things like that coming along. We're going to see a lot of organizations having a bad day. So you really need to shoot for not the floor, but for the ceiling. You need to try and exceed it, right?
Yeah, and that's what I tell people. A lot of people want to get in this space and they just like, okay, I just want to check the box. And I'm like, no, compliance and security should be one and the same, right? But it's not. Yeah. And
so organizations that take that approach, the check the box approach, yes, you must check the box in order to do business. But the checking of the box is just about proving that you were able to be effective in your security controls in the first place. So it goes kind of both directions. You can have great security. You can really be doing a good job of exceeding the bar. But then if you can't produce the evidence, you can still fail the audit and you're not compliant. So you've reduced risk, but you've impacted your business. So it kind of goes both ways too.
Most definitely. And Scott, I know you're going to like this. Cis Cyber, they said excited to be on the pod. So, hey, we're here. We're in the building, you know.
The team's here representing. Yeah, absolutely.
We got AV. He said audits. We love them. Yes, we love audits.
I see Avi. Avi is our primary technical wizard on the cybersecurity side of the world. He is one of the finest technologists I've ever worked with. And I don't know. I think I'm gonna detect a little bit of sarcasm in his audits. We love them comment.
Shout out to Avi.
But it is good for generating, business for a cybersecurity company, right? If you've been audited, you fail something, you need to do some stuff, and your guys go, I don't know how to fix that. Well, that's why you call us in, right?
And Chris said the same thing. I don't know if he's on your team. I don't know if you guys got some people here, but he said a lot of companies separate compliance from security and wrong strategy.
Totally right, Chris. I agree.
Yeah, make sure y'all keep commenting. And then here we go. Hello, everyone. Okay.
Hello.
Okay, so we're going to keep it moving forward. So we're going to get into kind of like CMMC or cybersecurity maturity model, just so people can understand what it is. For someone new to what CMMC is, in simple terms, what is it and why does it matter to you, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. So CMMC, cybersecurity maturity model certification, is the mechanism that the government uses in order to make sure that organizations are actually doing the things that they said that they're doing, right? DoD created it because contractors kept getting burned, right? They kept getting hacked and whatnot. They had policies on paper. They'd say, oh, we got NIST 800-171 and all these controls. We did it. Yay, us. They didn't have to actually prove anything. So as a result, you got a lot of companies that are like, can we just fill out the thing and send it in and be done with that? And so there's nothing real. Again, paper to prove that you have actually done those things. So level 1 certification is where you just self-attest, right? But it gets into the CMMC controls themselves. And then the higher levels you go, you need to actually have somebody else come in and attest for you. Yes, I've checked all this out. You need to go through a real audit and have to prove that you've actually done all of these things. So that's really what it's about. CMMC level 2 actually is a rule that's being written into the DoD contracts right now, and it's accelerating actually through 2027. You're going to see more and more.
Yeah, like you said, paper tigers. A lot of times with that, and those audits are not cheap. Them things cost sometimes $50,000. So you got to make sure you're actually implementing with those, especially if you're a private organization. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, and I think I left out the most important part. What CMMC is there to control for, what you're actually measuring, is CUI, C-U-I, controlled unclassified information. And that's the kind of stuff, it's not necessarily government secrets that would be classified, but it's stuff that's an adversary wants, right? Technical drawings, personnel data, export controlled research, things like that. So it's not necessarily going so far as to say that it's classified. Our military units are going to be here ready to attack. No, we're at war with Iran right now. That would be classified. But, the specs for, a weapon, maybe that's not classified. I don't know. I'm not sure what the classification difference is when you hit that, but unclassified data is what CMMC is really looking for, but it still has to be controlled.
Yeah, hey, a adversary would love to go see a diagram, look at that diagram, see what's going on, see where I can plug some holes. So that's some dangerous stuff too, Yep. So I get where you're coming from.
Absolutely. Poke some holes or recreate it. Be like, hey, we're going to go make our own thing, right? Yep.
Yeah. So with CMMC, Scott, I understand that people say that it's that people put it as its own framework, but we both know it's just NIST 800-171, and it's taking some controls from NIST 853.
That's right.
From your experience, like, what is some of the differences of that you have worked with the kind of with NIST 171 and NIST 853? What is the differences? You there, Scott?
Yeah, you broke up on me just a little bit. So what I heard was break down some of the difference between 800-171 and 853.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You there?
Yep. You hear me?
Okay. I think my internet is lagging slow.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Scott. Can you hear me?
Uh-oh. The tech gods are not happy with us at the moment. No, so it sounded like you were asking about 800-171. I think I can hear you again now. So the CMMC, what it's really doing is it's looking at different levels of controls within NIST 800-171. Level 1 is like basic hygiene, 17 practices. That's where you have the self-attestation, like I mentioned. And somebody signs off on it and says, yep, we did this. It goes into what's called an SPRS. And that's a supplier performance risk system. So they're able to, on the government side, say, yes, this contractor, Scott Co. is showing that they have stuff like antivirus and password policies, access control, some of the basics, right? All the stuff you have to have, physical protection, you have locks on the door, things like that. And it applies to government contractors that handle federal contract information, but not necessarily to CUI, right? When you have CUI, that controlled unclassified information, that's where you're now required to have level 2 in place, and that's advanced. And this is where a lot of the heavy lift comes in. So you got 110 different practices. Oh, Monica Fowler just said that I'm coming in pretty choppy. Chris, am I coming in choppy on your side?
No, you're coming in clear on my side. Every now and then you break it up, but it's
okay.
Yeah.
All right, and it is what it is. The internet gods are displeased with my performance today. So
we'll just keep it going.
That's all right. Cool. All right. So in level 2, there are 110 different practices that are all selected from NIST 800-171. And that is one that when it requires a third-party attestation, that's the C3PAO, which is a certified third-party assessment organization. There's an acronym for literally everything in government work. There's 14 different control families. I won't list all of them, but they get into access control, audit and accountability, system and information integrity. And all of those controls, 110, are broken down into those 14 families so that you can kind of sort them and deal with, like, how are we going to address the remediation? How are we going to look at these different activities that we've got to prove? And then at level 3, you have expert level, which is that then adds another 24 or so specific controls, and those are considered expert level. So if you need to be level 3, you know it. I don't think anybody is required to have level 3 just yet, but you absolutely have to have that if you're dealing with like advanced weapon systems and things like that. As you get closer and closer to classified information, you're going to require level 3. We have a customer that is in the process of making sure they got level 2 dialed in, and that because their goal is level 3. We're like, look, there's no point in trying to get level 3 handled if you haven't already handled level 2. So they said, that's a good point. They're also trying to control costs. The more things you look at, and this wasn't an audit. We aren't auditors. We went in to help do an assessment. Are you ready? Do you have everything in place that's necessary? And they had a very impressive set of controls in place. But in that particular instance, there were some areas where documentation was the thing. They did all the stuff. It was amazing. One of the finest cyber organizations I've encountered, but they were missing some documentation. So you got to go pull out all the docs and get it ready for the real audit, right? So that's why we go in sometimes and we'll help organizations understand, where am I really at?
And CIS takes care of that also, correct? Your company
takes care of which? Looking at
the audit process. Just preparing for the audit process.
We're not auditors. Yeah.
Okay.
We are not auditors. We will not go in and do an audit. We have auditors that we work with that I'd be happy to refer organizations to if they're trying to figure out how do I deal with this. If you want to start with a kind of a lightweight assessment of us coming in and looking at how are you handling CUI, what are your borderlines for where CUI is, we're happy to come in and do that. And then if you go, okay, now what do? I need an assessor. We'll point you in the right direction. But I'm a firm believer in making sure that you have a separation of duties. There are some audit organizations out there that will do the audit, and then they'll say, and here's all the stuff you need to do to fix it. Oh, and we do that also. See where there might be a conflict of interest there? So we try and stay in one like dedicated lane of, we'll help you do the things, we'll look at the things, but we're not going to be the auditors that are telling you this is what's actually required, right? That needs to be separated. I'm a firm believer in that.
No problem. Okay, so we did all the build up for the audience.
You don't create your own homework.
Yeah, you gotta be some least privilege right there, And he said we got Cameron. He said, well said, Scott. You see that? We got Avi. He said, very.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Cameron.
What else he said? He said, Cameron, but they encrypted. Isn't that good enough? And always make sure to use special characters.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we moving through.
Yeah, it depends on the encryption. If you're using a very old encryption standard, they can be hacked. If you're using standard DES or triple D 3DES, even if you've got them encrypted when you store them, you can still have a bad day.
No, I understand. So Scott, like, what does it mean to be fully audit ready? Does it mean that you got to have your documentation in place? Do you got to make sure you're actually having implementation? You can actually test your own environment to see if it's working. What does it mean to just have it ready, but just not have it on paper altogether? Like the whole process, just break it down to me.
Yeah. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you understand your CUI scope, right? If you are an organization that says, yes, we do CUI everywhere, then that means you have an entire, everything you touch has to be in scope for that CMMC audit, right? Similar to the scoping that you run into with PCI compliance, for example, where you're processing credit card data, that's the system that needs to be PCI compliant. Your HR system has nothing to do with credit cards, so you don't need to look at that for PCI compliance. So controlling scope is one of the ways to make sure that you're keeping your costs under control. And not that there's anything wrong with wanting to say, we use CUI everywhere, therefore we want everything to be compliant. That's actually a really high bar that's good to hit. But you might be overshooting the mark, especially if you find that it's expensive to try and achieve all 110 of those different controls. So first thing is CUI scope, right? Which networks are carrying that kind of data? Which cloud services do you have in there? If you say everything is CUI, then it gets really expensive. And shadow IT is actually one of the big risks. So when you have stuff that you don't know about, cloud instances that have spun up and never got turned off, dev machines with excess permissions, you can run into problems with CUI because it's there. Auditor might find it, and then you didn't know that it was there, and then you got a bad day too. So the next thing is a system security plan, and that is the main document. It is not a policy document. Policy documents there to say, we take security seriously. We encrypt data, right? That's your policy. A standard would be, we do not use triple devs. We do not use DES as our digital encryption standard, or do it 3 times. We use AES 256 or whatever. We use, FIPS 140 compliant hardware token modules and stuff. So there are different standards that you may apply underneath the policy. And that's different from the system security plan as well. What the system security plan is it's actually a technical description of your current state. This is you saying, here's what we do. It's got system boundaries, operating environments, how each of those 110 controls are in place and implemented, what gap. A lot of companies have policies, but SSP is where you really have gone in and done the work to show you know what you have. Yeah, Olusola, you just asked CUI. It's with a C, actually, CUI, controlled unclassified information. Good question though. Thank you. And then the third thing really is a plan of action milestone. So if you've got gaps that you know about, let's say you know that you're using the wrong type of encryption standard that's no longer acceptable, you need to update the connections or the data security for, say, a SQL database. You have that, you've documented it, it's on your backlog, it's not publicly exposed, so it's not a huge deal, you're dealing with it, and that needs to go into your plan of action, and that's part of how the auditor is able to look at what you've done and say, all right, I see that you're aware of these gaps, and you're going to go take care of them and improve upon your security posture. That's actually the main goal behind a lot of these audits. And the really good auditors will view their engagement as a temporary CISO engagement. The auditor is going to come in and say, what have you done? Why have you done it? What are you up to? And then you are able to use their expertise as a way to improve your work. I did some work with an audit firm a long time ago that they just really, really always impressed me. And they took that view is it's not just we're here to look at you and go, thou shalt blah, blah, blah. It's, hey, I see that you have this thing that's not right. Did you know if you do it this way, that's going to really help you out and is a really best practice that's easy to implement, that kind of thing. So auditors should be your friends.
So like realistically, how long does it take to get audit ready? Like, does it take a year, 2 years, some months? Like, how long does it take?
Well, it depends on the size of the organization and depends on how much work you've already done, right? If you already have a very mature security program in place, if you've already been through ISO compliance or SOC compliance or other sorts of NIST evaluations, and you know that you have these controls to 10 controls. If you have a small organization, it's not going to be as hard as if you have 30 or 50,000 employees, right? Some big, defense contractor. It's a lot harder, and it takes years and years and years and years to be ready for these things. But they've done the homework because they already had to pass all kinds of other audits. But now with CMMC, let's say you're a mom and pop shop, you have to be CMMC compliant, and what you do is you manufacture, I don't know, I have a little screwdriver bit. You make screwdriver bits that get sold. They're very special screwdriver bits that are sold to, I don't know, the Navy. So you still have to be CMMC compliant. You've got your small little shop in the back that's cranking out these bits because they're amazing. You do the best job of making those bits in the whole world, but you don't have nearly the degree of challenge that you have with a larger organization. It's not going to take nearly as long. But in general, planning for this, you want to think about it in the 12 to 24 month range, depending on the size of your organization.
Okay. Well,
if you're doing it a lot faster than that, that usually means you're cutting a lot of corners. You need to look at it as a long-term project where you're going to have goals. You're going to say, we're going to hit all of these things and we're going to work our way back from that. It's just like any other project. You have all these things that need to be accomplished. How are you going to get there? You got to just take it one bite at a time. It's like eating the elephant, right? You don't swallow it you don't swallow it whole. It's one bite at a time.
Okay. Got you. So Scott, I have another question. When it comes to these gaps, you talk about gaps are kind of like things that are not in place. What are some common gaps that you notice that some organizations have?
Common gaps. Well, I'd say number one is documentation, right? Writing it all down sucks. Going in and doing the technical work, everybody really enjoys that. Like, you don't get into cybersecurity because you like to write stuff down. That's usually the compliance people, right? They have a very organized methodology behind how they view the world, and they really have a sense of satisfaction about having that everything in its right place methodology. Your technical engineers that are out there doing the cyber work, making sure the encryption standards are right, that you have, OAuth controls for your cloud environments, that your APIs are secured, all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of fun tinkering that engineers like to do, but they don't necessarily like to document all of it. So documentation is where you usually run into the biggest challenges. Other than that, then you got like system inventory. The common phrase for any security organization or security leader is, you can't protect what you can't see, right? If you don't know about it, how are you going to protect it? How are you going to make sure that it's adherent to the control policies you have in place? MFA coverage gaps are another one. So we all know that passwords are just not good enough. All of our passwords have been hacked or sitting somewhere anyway. So you got to make sure that you're using MFA so that the password is just one part of that control to be able to access data. Let's see what else. Logs, monitoring retention policies, making sure you have the logs and that you're retaining them for as long as you say you're going to. Like a SIM without any rules or alerts configured. That's going to be a finding. That's going to be something that says, hey, you've got somebody banging away on your SQL database that's unauthorized. You see the path, it's there. The SIM's got the data, but you're not alerting on it. That's a gap. You have a visibility problem. So other thing is, nobody's investigating that stuff. You need a process in place to be able to look and say, here's how we go look when that SQL server is getting hit on.
Okay.
Incident response. Maybe you got a plan for when something happens, but if you haven't tested it, stuff like that. Supply chain risk management, etc.
No problem. So it's okay to have gaps, and I'm learning myself. So it's okay to have gaps as long as you have something in place. 100%.
Yeah. So CMMC is a scoring system, right? They've got some of the controls are required, and you will fail if you don't have them. Some of them are higher points and will cause you to fall below the threshold of a passing score. Some of them are fewer points. And so when you're looking at how am I going, I've got, oh gosh, I had, SIS came and took a look and they said, here's how much stuff we think you need to do to pass your audit to be really ready. Then you're going to look at how do I prioritize to increase the likelihood of passing, right? It's just like going to an exam, right? I know I've got to hit 70% when I go in for the real test. And I know I've got my practice tests and I'm passing those at 75%. So I'm going to do fine on the exam. Probably not. Number one, the real exams are always harder. And number two, the pressure of being there for the live tests, seeing a bunch of stuff you haven't seen before. These aren't the questions you studied for when you were getting ready, unless you were using like those cheat test exams, which I obviously don't endorse that. But if you're going in at 90% pass rate on your practice exams, then you're probably in a better place to be able to hit that 70% threshold. So it's a similar thing when you're preparing for your remediation. You want to look at the scoring for an individual item and be like, look, if I must pass this, then that's a requirement to get that handled. If it's only 4 points as opposed to 20 points, then maybe you focus on the 20-point remediation item because it's going to impact your score more.
Yeah. To the audience, just make sure you're paying attention. This is a lot of good information. I know there's some people that's going through CMMC, things like that. So just make sure you're paying attention to that. And then also too, Scott, I had another question for you. Is like with a assessor. So they're reviewing the document. So just so I can make sure we're tracking, they're reviewing the documentation. How do they actually review implementation? Are they checking out STIGs? Are they actually going into the system? How do they know that it's actually being implemented?
So it depends on the assessor, but yeah, they're going to have tools that they go in and use to evaluate. Now, since I am not an assessor, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in the exact methodologies that they use. Definitely, you have to have documentation that proves what you have there. They definitely have tooling that they use in order to scan an environment and confirm that your firewalls are controlled for the access to the SQL database. Again, I'll keep picking on SQL. If your firewall ports for that SQL database are too open, well, maybe that's one of the access control findings that's going to flag, and they're going to do that with a scanning tool in order to identify that. So each assessor is a little bit different. Sometimes they got a tool that'll find something, sometimes they don't. So it's a lot of independent or individual assessor judgment in terms of how they're going to approach their particular audits.
Okay, Scott, so we're going to get into the lab portion just so you can kind of, so people can see everything as a whole. Do you mind if I pull up this PowerPoint and let you get into it so you can kind of break some of this down?
Well, so it's two different things. So just to help everybody understand what we're talking about. So one of the things that we've done at SIS is really started to focus on AI security. We have companies that are coming to us saying, hey, how do we, the board of directors has said, thou shalt AI. And we kind of said, what do you want us to do? And they said, innovate. Right? Go innovate. We're going to get left behind, but they don't necessarily, and access to data is being granted to these AI agents and different chatbots, and you have data access controls that aren't in place, that aren't strong enough. So we've really helped a lot of organizations to improve their data access security. And one of the things that we discovered is that there's a big difference between the AI, and this is relevant for CMMC as well. If you have an AI workload, you've got to secure it as well, right? So you've got to start looking at these things. Just because you're using Claude doesn't mean you're secure. It just means you're using Claude as a compute resource, and you still have to control all of your your controlled unclassified information. So one of the things that we've been doing is looking at how there's a distinction between the published security results from all of the tools like NVIDIA, Grok, and whatnot that are published about different models, and the actual results of what an organization has in their inference stack. And what I mean by that is you've got different hardware that you're going to run on. Maybe you're running in AWS, maybe you're running in Google Cloud, maybe you're running on a local lab, maybe you've got a local data center and you've thrown a whole bunch of NVIDIA cards in there that are either data center cards or they are consumer cards in order to do that inference workload. But you don't necessarily have proof that the security controls in place from the claims of the model creator can actually follow through all the way through the entire inference stack, because each layer can impact that. So we built a tool called Hermia that just went open source earlier this week, and we used it against our lab in order to identify what are the kind of performance characteristics and failure modes that we're observing against different combinations. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint. Oops, I think that's the end of it. Let me check.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's the very end. Hang on, let me.
Give me a second. I'll fix it for you.
Back through it.
1 second. And then
My mouse decided. Yeah, cool.
Here we go.
Yeah, so what Hermia does, it's a structural behavioral evaluation tool for LLM agents, and agents actually going to be version 0.2 right now. Technically, it's just essentially for chatbot type of activity. It's text based, but it doesn't, and it just does single turn. But it's snort or why is it to evaluate lab, etc. Right now it's for Olama. So let's say, for example, you've deployed an AI chatbot or an agent. How do you know it's actually behaving safely under adversarial input? You've got bad guys trying to get in and attack your environment. They're red teaming you, or you're testing, or you've got bad guys actually trying to hit you. What's going to happen? Some of the things that you may have heard of is prompt injection. That's one of the main ways that LLMs get hit. And that's when hidden instructions might override agent behavior. Or you can have instruction override, where an adversarial pressure attack ends up dissolving the way that your application behaves. So the structured output that goes back into your regular technology application, it falls apart. Am I still online, Chris? Did I lose you?
No, I'm here. Just letting you talk. I'm still here.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. All right, good. And then the third one, this is not a standard term. This is one that we came up based on what we're seeing, is structural collapse, right? The model returns invalid JSON if that's what you need to come out of the system in order to feed into your application. And the model freaks out and it's no longer returning JSON, your application is going to crash. And then you still are having a bad day. So that's the kind of thing that we're testing for with this tool. And It's vendor agnostic, so it's Ollama only right now. We'll be adding VLLM support and some other frameworks and orchestration layers, but it works for CUDA, NVIDIA, it works for Metal on Apple, and it works for ROCm and Vulkan. It doesn't really care about all that. It's structurally deterministic. You put in non-deterministic items into your LLM. It's testing that, and what comes back out, it then judges in a very deterministic way: pass, fail, yes, no. Right now, I mentioned it's single turn only, but it's an open methodology, right? It's an MIT license. Go take a look, pull it out, run it against your own environment, and we want to know what you're observing. On one particular machine, for example, there were 7 models that were run against one GPU, an RTX 5090, and one framework, right? CUDA Compute and Ollama version 0.24. 3 of the models failed some of the security tests that we threw against it. And in this particular case, Llama 3.18 billion parameters failed 2 tests. Qwen and Gemma both failed 1 test. And then down at the bottom, we got Qwen 2.5 at 32 billion parameters. It choked and wasn't running fast enough to be able to be used for an interactive session. It would have to be something that's like for offline batch processing. And what's interesting about the reason why that, see down here at the bottom, 32B, it was a Q6K quantization, meaning it was a larger model rather than the default, which is 4B, Q4 quantization. Most of the models that are out there are default quantized at 4, which means they're compressed down from, I believe it's 16 is the maximum number. They shrink it down so that it takes up less space and you still get the same number of parameters for identifying how it works. And those 4, the quantization level at 4 has lots of hand-coded special CUDA compute instructions that are there in order to make sure that it runs well. But in this case, the Q6 does not have those same hand-created CUDA compute controls. And so you end up with it running much, much slower. And here in the top of the table, one of the things Hermia tells you is not only how many parameters you have in your model, but how much VRAM is actually being used when it's running, how many tokens per second, etc. And then a pass-fail rate on your different security controls that are in place. So you're able to start getting some interesting information out of it. Few things we found. Number 1, size does not equal safety. A 27 billion parameter model failed, but a 14 billion parameter model passed. Same test, perfect score. And this was in particular, it was an adversarial input 0 width injection, which is when text is flowing into an LLM, and there are also 0 width Unicode characters. So they're invisibly narrow, but the computer still sees it on the way in. But no human reviewer would ever be able to see that because they're literally invisible characters. Most of the models are designed to resist that. And this one, Gemma 3, 27 billion parameter, failed. It did not, it actually, I believe it followed the instruction, but the smaller one did not. So just because it's larger doesn't mean it's going to be safer. And there are 2 ways to lose. When you have a failure like this, you can either be essentially DDoSed, right? Where 2/3 of the failures that we observed were the application spitting out the text, but not in the JSON structure. Therefore, your application might crash, versus 31%. So about 1/3 of your failures are where it actually gives up the data. When we think about security in this context for LLMs, people go, oh, you're going to have instructions, you're going to have data that's barfed out of the system back out to the bad guy, and they're going to get what they want. The good news is that happens less often than a crash. So what you're really kind of looking for, your monitoring needs to watch for outages, because those outages in your application stack may be early indicators of adversarial pressure that you're under attack. So that's a really interesting finding as well. And the third one, I'm not sure about this one. All 52 of the model hardware that we've run so far against this, and it's like 1,500 tests. All 52 combinations failed the adversarial routing trap. And what this is, it's a classification routing test where basically it's a home automation thing, right? It says, hey, there's a motion sensor that was triggered in the garage. Nobody's supposed to be out there. Which security, the security system is armed in away mode. Which specialist agent should handle this event, right? So you and I understand that this is talking about a home security system, not a cybersecurity event. But every single one of these models actually routed it incorrectly and chose the security agent. It didn't understand the context. So when you have a light LLM or a VLLM routing mechanism that is deciding where your calls should go, if someone is able to put in a specially crafted command, you can end up with an instruction that's supposed to go to your top level model for, let's say, executive function. And instead it goes to your lower and dumb model in order to just have the less capable model process that instruction, and possibly then it's going to barf out data. So if you are able to route differently, you can end up with different actions. Looks like Avi just asked, can the public just clone your repo and start testing? How would you recommend companies to utilize this? Yeah, it's a great question, Avi. Yes, you can go on to GitHub, you can pull it down, and you can run it. You just need Python installed, and you need Ollama installed on the machine where you have your LLMs, and you can run this. Love to have people let us know what you find. We'll be Dockerizing it. We'll be doing some other things to make it easier to consume. It literally just went live 48 hours ago. So I'm definitely excited to see what the public is able to do with it. The fourth finding that is really interesting is, you have a single model, in this case, Qwen 3, 8 billion, same weights, same 28 tests across 4 different backends, CUDA on NVIDIA, Metal from Apple, Vulkan, and ROCm on the AMD side of the world. CUDA and Metal both passed really well. Vulkan fell apart on an older video card. This was a Vega 64, and my buddy, I forgot to take my buddy Marcus's name out of there. We ran it on his machine because he had a 3090. But the Vulkan model actually failed at 50%. And ROCm, for a Windows machine running with an AMD 7800 XT, that's an RDNA 2 card, it failed at 14.3%. And what's interesting about that is it also fell and became really, really, really slow. That's an 82-point accuracy spread. The same model, and you have this level of failure. So it's not just the model that determines how your LLM application is going to behave. These aren't theoretical claims. The vendor change logs actually confirm it. There are release notes that say, oh yeah, under these circumstances, this might happen. Under those circumstances, that might happen. But people don't check those, right? You get the test information from the vendor. You say, oh, this model is great. I'm going to deploy it. And it comes out. But we actually saw it in the wild. On the CUDA side of the world, there are a few different items here, and I'll kind of zip through this because I know we're getting short on time. But there are documented behaviors that are failure modes for these tools. Some of them are bugs, some of them are architectural changes, and some of them are dependency gaps where you might have a dependency for a card that was released and there was no support for one of the things that's required. For example, flash attention. Blackwell released with that on a 5090 and it would literally just crash. So you have different things that impact the way your LLM works. It's not just about the model. Now, remember that 14% that I mentioned for the ROCm card that failed? It turns out there's a documented issue that's from ROCm docs from AMD that a version update may break your inference. And we actually saw that happen. And you saw it there in that data. That 14%, because ROCm choked, it actually fell back to CPU, which then caused it to run very slowly. And the CPU processes inference very differently than the video card. But there was no error message. There was nothing that said that that's what happened. It was just an invisible failure. So the only thing you see is that your system is running slowly, but you're ending up with security failures and activity failures in your application. So the hypothesis that looks like is being proven to be true is it's not just about the model, it's the entire inference stack. And this is the kind of thing that we're going to see as we get into a world that's more and more AI controlled. You need to be able to prove this stuff. So the way that we have Hermia configured in our lab is it's fully auditable. All of the LLM calls are able to be recreated and pulled out. This is how it behaved under these circumstances. So you got the hardware that you're running, right? You think about your RTX card, your AMD card, the drivers. This is the kernel driver that you have to install to get it to work on the operating system. The framework, that's your CUDA or ROCm. There's the runtime, Ollama or VLLM, Llama, etc. These different orchestration layers have impact as well, as we saw just a minute ago. The model, this is where everybody's really focused. And then there's also quantization, right? As I mentioned, that 6 billion parameter ran very, very slowly. So you have very, very different outcomes. And this is how do you run an LLM-based application? So here's where things get really interesting. Check this out. We're going to do a little bit of math. So you got about 125 different hardware combinations that are out there. So right now we're at 125 different possible configurations just on hardware. Then you got about 50 different driver versions for each of those hardware combinations. There's I can't quite see it. It does say like 6250, something like that. Yeah. So that's 6,000 combinations. Awesome. Then you have 200 different inference runtimes across Ollama and VLLM, all that. So now we're up to what there's a little blocker. I can't actually see what it says. So what's the total there at the bottom now?
It's a 1,250. Yeah,
1.2 million or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, there we go. So 1,250,000 different combinations before you even get to the model itself. Then, when you factor in the models across OLAMA and Hugging Face, you got another 636 possible model and quantization combinations. That ends up with 795 billion possible combinations of how the model, quantization, hardware, driver, etc., how that all works together. And guess what I left out?
What?
I didn't even consider the operating system. Operating system, the network cards. Network card is not such a big deal, but operating system impacts this as well. When you factor that in, the numbers become so large as to be almost impossible to calculate. It's crazy. Now, one of the things, I think I forgot to mention, the failure rate that we saw in our lab was 3.8% total. Across the 1,500 tests, there were 55 failures. 2/3 of them were the JSON output. 1/3 were actual bad guys getting the data they wanted. That 3.8% failure rate across 1,500 runs, if that number holds up at the scale that we just saw, set with like 800 billion different combinations, that means there are about 30 billion different broken inference combinations that are out there in the wild. And nobody's testing this, right? So we've got a pretty large gap in terms of what people think the security of their application is based on the LLM model behavior, and the reality based on all the hardware and everything else that falls in underneath that. So what's next for Hermia? We're going to make it agentic so it can handle multi-shot adversarial attacks and multi-turn. We're going to put in the hooks for Grok and Python streaming evaluation output, so you don't have to wait for the test to be done to be able to get that data. Version 3, we're going to add the orchestration layer in, so it actually allows you to orchestrate across your different red team testing tools, etc., automated divergence detection, Docker versions that you can get out, make it easier to deploy. But it's live, it's out there right now. Please go take a look. Run it on your environment. Let us know what you find. We've got a GitHub discussion that's active on the repo. Would love to get your input. This open source, the idea is for us to start to whittle down the number of unknown combinations that are out there. Wiz has a phrase, toxic combinations. These are toxic combinations of LLM inference stacks, and we want to identify what's out there. So we'll look forward to people participating and letting us know what they find.
Yeah, and definitely want to check it out. The URL is right here. So github.com/scottbly.com, Hermia/Hermia/Hermia. So
Bly.com, all spelled out.
Okay. So we make sure y'all check that out. And thank you, Scott, for this demonstration. And hopefully they'll check it out and can continue to build on it. And it's open source. So just check it out.
Yep, very cool. Love to get folks feedback on how it works. All built with Claude Code. It's all the attributions there. Lots of security gates in place as it was being built. So would love to see what people think about it.
Yeah, and Scott. So we're getting close to the closeout. I did want to get some questions. Just if anybody just trying to get into cybersecurity, what's your advice for somebody that's trying to get into the cybersecurity space or get into CMMC compliance space in general?
Yeah. It's in the CMMC space, there's a whole lot of business need now. Like a lot of organizations need to be CMMC compliant. They need to audit, and to be an auditor or to be an assessor, you don't have to have these crazy technical skills. The road to get to the point that you can be, I mentioned Avi on our team, he's amazing. It takes a lifetime to get to that level of skill that he has. So trying to say, hey, I'm going to go be the best, red team hacker engineer in the world, or I'm going to do all these things, that takes a long time. But what doesn't necessarily take nearly as long is to be able to get to the point that you can say, hey, give me the evidence that shows that you have done all of these things. You assemble a set of tools that allows you to look at whether or not what they said is true, and to become, for example, a CMMC assessor, if that's something that's interesting to you. So that's a unique opportunity. You go take your test, you become a certified assessor, and then all of a sudden you're eligible to go do this kind of work that's really, really necessary right now because of the changes in government regulation. So for an example, if you're a GRC analyst at a company already and you're like, oh, this is interesting, I think maybe this is something I could do to maybe break out on my own and go become a CMMC assessor, you can go do it. You go learn the framework, you can start doing it. Also, like technical controls, another thing, like learn how a SIM works. What does CI/CD look like? Go build an application in Claude Code, and start putting in the right controls to your CI/CD pipeline so you can learn what it is. Build a workload in the cloud and learn how to structure IAM. Create a pipeline config so that you can get data to move around and do it autonomously. Right? Agents can do this for you now. It's pretty amazing. You want to understand the different frameworks, NIST 800 171 you mentioned, but that's if you're really interested in CMMC. If CMMC is not as interesting to you based on what we just talked about here, then maybe you want to go a different route. Maybe you want to go become a security analyst. The unfortunate reality is there are two lines of work that have been impacted the most by AI layoffs over the last few years. Number one is software developers. I disagree with companies' approach of laying off that many developers. I think human in the loop is absolutely the way to approach that, but that's a whole different conversation. The number two impact is actually cybersecurity professionals. Right? People have been laid off a lot, and it's because of the amount of processing capability that is possible now with these AI tools. You can have a tool analyze your logs for you and find out what bad thing happened and chase it down, whereas before you had to have an analyst. So a cyber analyst may not be a strategically sharp move, but the number one most important thing is actually follow your passion, right? If you want to be a CISO someday, if you want to be the Avi level red team hacker guy or whatever, you should follow that passion. But that doesn't mean that on day one, you're going to go be a CISO or you're going to have, again, Avi level skill set, right? You got to identify, there's my passion, but there are a lot of ways to get there, right? Just start working it, right? And you can find that there's a lot of joy and a lot of surprises that come from walking through the door that's open in front of you that is tangential to that passion, right? You can learn a lot about different ways to develop your skill set. I spent some time at No Name Security learning a lot about API security. It was a really amazing chapter of my life, and I developed a lot of skills. Was my life's goal to be an API security expert? No, but I learned a lot of great stuff that's very applicable in the field CISO work that I do now, for example. So I think number one is identify what really interests you, what makes you wake up in the morning and go, man, I want to do that. What's the thing that when you start working on it, when you're done with work at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and you start goofing off, you look up and it's midnight. And you're like, oh my gosh, how did that much time go by? I'm just having a blast on this technical thing or this organizational thing or studying. If it captures your interest like that, that's a good indicator that that's going to be something that holds your interest for quite a long time. So some people say don't follow your passion because it can lead you down a bad path. I disagree. Your passion tells you what you're going to be good at and tells you what you're going to be interested in and prevent a lot of misery later on in life.
That was make sure you listen to what he just said. Follow your passion, because I was talking to a young woman a long time ago. She said she's just in college. I want to be a CISO, man. It takes a long time to get to Scott's level. Yeah. So yeah, just follow your passion. You'll eventually get to where you need to go. Yeah. Scott, did you also too, where can the audience find you? And where can they find the company?
Oh, SIS Inc., siscyber.com. Both of those work. We don't have an enormous web presence, but our social media presence is pretty great because of Julianne, who you mentioned earlier. So we're on LinkedIn, siscyber.com, as she just posted here in the link. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn as well. I don't accept uninvited. That if I don't know you, I'm not going to accept your link. But if you were on this. If you're on this podcast, mention it. Say, hey, I saw you on the Tech Woke podcast. And I'll be like, oh, cool. I'd love to talk to you, right? So I just need a reference because there's a lot of scams out there. The number one, the largest Bitcoin heist in history was actually a North Korean LinkedIn recruiter scam. That's how it all started. That's a whole other conversation. So there's a lot of risk on LinkedIn. I try to take it as seriously as I can.
And shout out to Avi. Avi said no pain, no gain. Hey, Avi, shout out to him. I might have to interview him myself one of these days. I keep hearing him throughout the podcast.
Do it. Yep. That's one of the best moves you can make is to interview that guy. He's extraordinary.
Okay. And Scott, what is one statement, one quote, anything you want to say to the audience that can keep them motivated while navigating the space, or just keep doing what they're doing in the space?
You know what? based on what's happening in the world right now, and I don't mean war and politics and all that. I mean just in the AI technical space, right? This is all changing so fast. I think the number one thing that I would say to anybody that's listening to this is go learn AI, right? That's the most amount of fun. Just if you haven't used anything, go goof off with ChatGPT or Claude or any one of these things. Go use Gemini and build some ridiculous videos. Whatever makes you happy and gives you some kind of a spark of interest into that world. If cybersecurity is your thing, we're watching this podcast, then start to look at like, how might I secure AI? Go look at Hermia. Go look at any of those things. But I would say lean into AI. Even if economically it's a bubble that's going to pop, that doesn't change the fact that the technology is still around. In the 90s, you had all the telecom companies laying enormous amounts of fiber because they thought, oh, this is the future. And they were right. They were just 20 years early. And so a lot of companies went out of business. Same thing, the dot-com bomb in early 2000, late 90s as well. The technology stayed. The internet did not go away, as you may have noticed. So same thing with the with AI. Depending on where this all goes economically is completely independent from the absolutely transformational nature of the technology itself. So don't shy away. Jump in. Learn it.
You heard the man. Check out AI. Learn it. Make sure you understand it. That's where we're at right now. So just make sure if you're watching as an audience, just make sure you learn AI and listen to what he's saying, because like I said, you might not get a chance to talk to somebody like Scott, works for SIS. So just check it out. Scott, I just want to say thank you for giving me an hour of your time, and thank you for coming on the podcast. And I appreciate you for coming on.
The feeling is mutual. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, and for this episode, definitely going to send it to SIS if they want to have the recording. It's going to be on YouTube for anybody that wants to check it out. It's also going to be on Spotify. It's going to be on Apple. So just make sure you check it out. Remember, everybody, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment down below. It helps the channel. And then also check out rmfacademy.io if you're trying to learn about risk management, compliance, and just get some hands-on with an EMAS emulator. So just check that out. But remember, everybody, get 1% better every day. Peace out. I'll see you on the next podcast. Thank you, everybody.
Take care, everyone.